I may not be an expert mechanic, nor do I think I'd survive even 30 seconds as an off-road rally racer, but when presented with the opportunity to do both of these things in a world full of physics-bending, reality-distorting anomalies in the Pacific Northwest, I said, only if it's a video game. And it turns out it is a video game called Pacific Drive. Dive into the role of a mute protagonist that decides to take a trip to the mysterious walled-in area called the Olympic Exclusion Zone, where some kind of massive science experiment went awry, prompting the government to seal the whole thing off. On your winding journey toward your destination, weird shit comes knocking, and when you answer the door, it's a giant glowing portal that sucks you and your entire car inside. After being recombobulated, you'll begin your adventure in the floating remnants of your vehicle until you stumble onto a somehow even shittier car, this station wagon, and tune into the disembodied voices of a couple of stooges that now guide your way. As you Clark Griswold your way across the countryside, you'll eventually make your way to a live-in garage home base, which will serve as a launching point for your Chernobyl vacation voyages. From here, you'll gain the guidance of a new authoritarian that instructs you on how to get your rolling shipbox just a bit more functional for your endeavor in figuring out how to get out of this prison of questionable reality in the car you're now apparently bound to. After you picked a destination node on this wall-sized map of extremely important icons with nearly comprehensible definitions, you'll roll out to fast travel to your next area where you'll begin the part of the game you'll be repeating perhaps dozens of times for the next 25 hours, cruising around dilapidated forest roadways and collecting all of the best junk you can find. You'll be zipping between crusty scientific buildings and abandoned cabins that seem moments from complete collapse, scooping up pieces of plastic, old clothing, broken glass, and any other magnificent treasures you'd normally find falling out of the back of a garbage truck. You'll even have a giant metal grinder you can use to shred electronics and other vehicles to fully express your appreciation of recycling. But you won't just be able to leisurely grab all of these tetanus-inducing goodies for your collection. As you dive deeper into the walls of this seemingly idyllic forested land of peaceful vistas and deserted everything, you'll start encountering some strange effects and creatures across the environment. Radioactive bubbles may suddenly pop into existence and try to melt your organs out. Giant floating garbage monsters will roam around looking terrifying only to steal your stuff and drag it off to a random location. Huge pillars of earth will fly out of the roadway like the antithesis of potholes. You'll even get randomly appearing mannequins that will explode if you hit them with your car, just like a real person. These, along with a shitload of other even more malicious anomalies, will make your trash collecting adventure as dynamic as it is horrible. But you don't just drive out of this increasingly dangerous world, you'll need to collect these orbs of magical technology power and stuff them into your passenger seat. With enough of these anchors and the energy they deliver, you'll be able to open up a giant sky beam, which also triggers a deadly battle royale shrinking perimeter of radioactive death, and proceed to haul ass toward that beam for a dramatic and blinding escape. An escape that will bring you right back to your garage home where you can begin the entire second half of the game of fixing and improving your busted ass hoopty with all of the junk you've obtained. At first, all you'll be able to do is slather every surface and mechanical part in glorious Bondo until it's in working order. But eventually you'll unlock new features in your base to build new parts that make your bag and wagon harder, better, faster, and stronger with all sorts of new tools like resource detectors and the wonderful auto parker, so I could finally stop having my car roll away and attempt to take off to safety without it still being in park. With your rolling turd fully polished, charged up, full of fuel, and outfitted with the latest contraptions, you're ready to map your way to a new destination and once again punch your time card as an Olympic Peninsula garbage man. Pacific Drive, the next open-world survival crafting adventure disguised as a creepy sci-fi mechanic simulator. For someone who typically avoids horror games, I wasn't certain I'd be interested in this title. Starting out, it was hard to tell if there were a lot of existential threats or creatures that would sneak up behind me, causing some surprisingly feminine screams. However, there wasn't much of that at all. The majority of the things that affect each journey are environmental, and your task is more to avoid or evade them as they appear than engage with them at all. There are a ton of creepy background sounds that seem kind of unnecessary after a while, but it's easy to drown those out with the radio of your jalopy blasting a pretty great soundtrack. Pacific Drive also features some dynamic conditions that each of the regions can suffer from, like perpetual storms or a completely blinding amount of darkness, and often a combination of many of these. As you get further in the game, this makes the already somewhat tedious task of collecting resources into an intense challenge. Sometimes your car will be dragged around or bombarded with electricity or radiation that rips it apart and tosses it in the air as you desperately try to get it to a slightly safer location. After engaging with this on numerous runs though, it does get a little repetitive, even as you discover new resources, anomalies, and functionality for your car and base. The story and the characters, while all extremely well voiced, don't do much to alleviate the eventual monotony of this process. Even that cool soundtrack becomes a little too familiar after 15 or 20 hours of hearing the same songs. If there was a little more of a visual element to many of the audio or text notes discovered, and maybe even some photos of the characters speaking, it would be a little easier to get into the story and appreciate the sparse moments that it pops back up. However, by the end of the 20-ish hours it took me to complete, these issues were never enough to make the game lose the thrill of navigating the perils of the Olympic Peninsula and returning once again to deposit my bounty and maximize my car's capabilities. So that's why Pacific Drive is getting the abbreviated score of good. If you'd like to see more hot takes, warm satire, and tepid commentary about video games, make sure to like this video and check out more abbreviated reviews.